Welcome to Destination Marriage, a podcast about successfully navigating the winding roads of marriage. Whether you are looking to get married, you are engaged, newly married, or have been married for years, we want to share with you how we have successfully navigated those winding roads over the past 18 plus years.
Join us on this journey as we discuss real life experiences, both highs and lows, and what we have learned along the way. Happiness, grace, passion are some of the things we all strive for in marriage, and we invite you to take this journey with us. Welcome to Destination Marriage.
Hi everyone, I'm Jackie.
And I'm Tommy.
And welcome back to Destination Marriage. This is the first episode of our Destination Growth series, and we hope it gives you some perspective, perhaps from a different angle than you would think. So what is Destination Growth? What we will be doing in these periodic episodes is discuss a book, an article, or blog that focuses growth in some form, whether it's personal or when it has to do with parenting or marriage topics.
Yeah, so me and Jackie will each read the book or article and then kind of write down our own thoughts on what it means to us, how would we apply it personally, what it would mean for our marriage, and then lastly, how both of us thinks it should impact the other. It really does talk about action, right, and how to use that stoicism and that philosophy as a framework to take action. That's one of the real big takeaways and one of the reasons I really enjoy the book so much. I've listened to it a couple times on Audible and read through it myself, and it's just got so many good nuggets. There's almost too many. We could do an episode on each chapter if we really wanted to. But so the book is broken into 3 sections. It talks about the discipline of perception, the discipline of action, and the discipline of the will. Each section then has chapters dedicated to each of these topics, and there are a number of really good stories about real people throughout history that have overcome obstacles and kind of broken down how they did it and how they used the philosophy of stoicism to overcome whatever obstacle that is. And so there's so many, just great takeaways. So as I look without going into chapter by chapter, I think some of the big ones for me, as far as my life, both things that I think I do well and things I could certainly improve on, live in the present moment and not let thoughts of future calamities or past successes or future successes necessarily drive you too much in the moment, because it can be overwhelming. I think right now, in this whole age of coronavirus, being cognizant of where you're at in this time and the stresses and the issues, and using those, what's a huge obstacle for all of us in the whole country, using that as kind of fuel to take time and say, okay, what can we learn from this? What can we get out of this? What can we do right now that can have impact? That was one of the big takeaways for me. Yeah. Get moving, which sounds easy enough, but I know for me personally, it talks about in the kind of that second section about action. It's it's really easy to sit around and struggle with what's going on and being kind of paralyzed by that. So just the idea of get moving sounds so simple, but how many times have I personally just gotten stuck and then don't do anything? Yeah. Because I'm just taking action, right? I think the first part about perception, I think overall I actually tend to have a decent perception on things, and I don't take things, I tend to look at them objectively more so than emotionally or subjectively. I try to take a step back and say, okay, that wasn't about me. It just happened, or that person's reaction was just based on their perception. It's not a knock on me, or sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, but
no, I definitely think that's one of your, in reading the book, that's definitely one of your top strengths is perception, whereas that's probably something I can work on. I recognize it in reading the book. That's what's kind of really good about this book, is with so many quick, not even quick, but there's a lot of short stories that you can easily, reading, the stories and, may really resonate with you personally, depending on where you are at that point in your life. Like right now, obviously, we're all experiencing certain things with the coronavirus. So I'm reading this book again because we have read it before. And I think the first time I read it, I applied it more so to being, self-employed, being an entrepreneur, coming from sales, and reading it this time. And I listened to it and I read it. It applies to me differently now. There are certain things that were more eye-opening.
Yeah.
And
like what?
The
What do you
first
mean?
time, well, I'm going to read an excerpt from the book that
Sure.
to me, it really rings true, which I don't even know why it didn't really jump out at me when I read the book the first time. But I think if I read it to you, and I haven't told you what part of this book that I was like, oh, I feel like, and this has not happened to me, this is not my story before I read it, but it just jumped out at me. So,
Okay.
and forgive me if I butcher this person's name too. There was little evidence that
Demosthenes, whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
That
was
guy.
destined to become the great orator of Athens, let alone of history. He was born sickly and frail and nearly debilitating speech impediment. At 7 years old, he lost his father, and then things got worse. The large inheritance left to him intended to pay for tutors, and the best schools was stolen by the guardians entrusted to protect him. I mean, hello.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know what? Now that you're saying that, reading that story like that, I didn't put two and two together till you just read it, and I'm sitting there looking at you, and that's your life.
Well, I'm not him. I don't have
No, there's
but there's certain things
come
that,
on.
yeah,
Your father,
right.
you lost your father at 8.
Yeah.
And you were in a bad situation for
I was.
for
I had a
years,
very
with your
difficult
stepdad.
childhood. Yeah. They refused to pay his tutors, depriving him of the education he was entitled to. Still weak and sick, Demosthenes, again, I'm probably not saying this right, but
okay.
was unable to distinguish himself in the other critical sphere of Greek life, the floor of the gymnasia. Here he was, fatherless, effeminate, awkward child who no one understood, who everyone laughed at, not exactly the boy you'd expect to soon hold the power to mobilize a nation to war by his voice alone. Disadvantaged by nature, abandoned by the people he depended on, nearly every wrong that can be inflicted on a child befell Demosthenes, whatever. None of it was fair. None of it was right. Most of us were we in this position would have given up right then and there, but he did not. So, really in that short story, a lot of things, if you continue to read, he'll talk about in the story how he basically trained himself.
Yeah.
He trained himself. He would put marbles in his mouth to kind of learn how to, be a phenomenal speaker. He wanted to overcome these obstacles that were in his way. And obviously these were things that he didn't necessarily bring upon himself, but life threw at him.
Yeah.
And, that really rings true to me. Yeah, maybe in my childhood, definitely, but even now as an adult where we've had changes that have been thrown our way together, as husband and wife. And when I first read it, I was, like I said, looking at it from the perspective of a business owner, because when you're in sales, you have obstacles thrown your way.
Right.
When you're trying to grow your business, when you're trying to pursue, new clients, there are certain things that are just completely out of our control. How do we react to them? I like the fact that it shows examples, and in his story, how he was able to pick himself up by his bootstraps and said, you know what, I'm going to overcome this no matter what. And there were things that he did that maybe we wouldn't necessarily be willing to do.
Right. He was creative. Now, obviously, we don't need to put pebbles in our mouth, but
No.
The point there is that he created, a path and created disciplined habits to improve and to get to the goal he ultimately had.
It takes a lot of strength, a lot of mental strength, emotional strength.
Yeah, it really does. That's great. I think, for another one for me was follow the process. I'm an athlete and I'm a sports guy, and I think there's certain things I was reading through that.
Yeah.
It kind of hit me as like, I fully understand and accept, like from an athletic standpoint, the process of working out or getting to a certain goal. And I can apply that in that little sphere of my world and my life pretty easily because I've been doing it my whole life. But how I need to use that in other things in life, in work, in entrepreneur, and like have a process and stick to it and be disciplined to stick to it. I bounce around a lot, with work stuff where I might be busy, but if there's a process in place by others that have done it before me and it works, it'd be foolish not to use it. So that was one for me. It was a good takeaway.
Yeah.
I
can see that.
One for the boys that I've actually said.
What's that?
My own version of this, but I forget which story it was talking about where it was, the advice of do your job and do it well. I remember when we talked with our older son when his first job, and I always joke with him just to make a point, like everyone should have a crappy first job. Like, you got to learn. He was a dishwasher. Like it's his first
job.
job.
It's not a sexy job at first.
But I told him, I said, look, I really would like from a work ethic standpoint, you got to understand, like do that job to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
It'll build in you that work ethic, regardless of your job. Do it to your best of your ability, and things will happen and improve. So I love that part. What about you? What other takeaways did you have from the book?
Well, before I go there, I do want to say that I had written down my notes as far as like what I thought for you in reading the book, and I wrote down when I was reading that part about following the process. That's immediately what jumped out at me for you.
That I do well,
that you
or
already
I need
do
to?
well.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
for certain
because,
things though, right?
Yeah, because you always focus on what can I do today, and I think I look at like huge picture, big picture, and I get overwhelmed with all the steps. But you're always very focused on what steps do I need to take towards excellence. Today I need to do A, B, and C. I'll worry about tomorrow. And I think that
Which
is
frustrates you sometimes.
It frustrates me. I think it's a positive. I think sometimes it can also be a negative, if you're not really looking far ahead. But
True.
But in that story, when it's talking about following the process, 100%, that's exactly, how you think, how you go about your day, your week. You definitely, have a process in place for many things that you're focused on, whether it's working out, doing projects at home, if you're studying, a particular subject or product for work, yeah, you definitely do that. You're not distracted by the competition either, which was also something that they had mentioned. I think that's probably something that maybe something I can work on. Looking at the competition, you always focus on what you're doing, how you can do it better. Those things, that chatter is just not a distraction for you, and that's a huge plus. That's a positive.
Appreciate that, baby.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I really do love the overall philosophy. I didn't realize until you start reading this book, and I'm absolutely gonna. There's a number of older Stoic writings that I'm absolutely gonna, for me, download or get the books. And it's just, the whole idea, there's a serenity prayer, right, which is pretty famous, but also just the idea that like there are certain things that are just out of your control, and it's all about how you perceive them, and how about you think about them. And that's really a difference between us. Like we really do have struggled with that in our marriage to a degree, right? Like if I see things a certain way,
we speak a different language when it comes to
yeah,
that,
we've had to really kind of evolve with that. I think we've done a pretty good job, don't you?
Yeah, no, I think so. It's been a learning process.
Mostly on my end, I got to admit, because I've been really particular over the last year of taking a step back and really trying to understand your perspective and where it's coming from and why you're saying, why you believe a certain thing or saying a certain thing or have a certain idea around the topic. I've been trying really hard to do that because I want to recognize. It's not that I didn't think your perspective was important or I just ignored it, but really better understand it to then come together and come up with some sort of resolution. But
yeah,
anyhow.
well, I mean, earlier in the book, it's probably like maybe in the first or second chapter, it had mentioned the school of adversity and stress, and I don't think that school looks the same for everyone.
Absolutely doesn't.
So when we both come into this marriage, or when you come into adulthood, you're coming from, a different school of adversity and stress versus the next person. My adversity and stress that I had, I don't recommend that anyone go to that school, but I'm just telling you, I had already been there and graduated with flying colors. But, we all have those things, and a lot of, who we are, who we become, not only as individuals, but in our marriage, is how we overcome adversity. A lot of this book is heavily focused on, how we do overcome those things. And like I said, your strength is absolutely with the process, perspective. Those are things I need to work on.
What other takeaways for you?
What I really loved, I think it's in the chapter, I think it's Iterate, and it talked about viewing ourselves as a startup. And I actually thought about that, and I love that. But I also think we need to view our marriage as a startup in every single chapter of our lives. It's not just when we are newly married, but that was a huge takeaway for me. I thought, wow, that's kind of genius if you think of it that way. We're constantly recreating ourselves, new goals, but in our marriage, we're also, going after new dreams together, and we're growing, and we should always have that same, think about the excitement, the energy behind a startup. You want to have that same energy, that same excitement in a marriage, or goodness, it'd be a snooze fest, but I like that idea. So that was a huge takeaway for me, as far as, how also when you're viewing yourselves as a startup, there's going to be failures. With any startup, it's not going to be smooth sailing. And obviously for us, we've had failures over the years. Some of them have been, maybe things that just happened, that were out of our control, but mistakes that we made. And so I think that failure can be an asset if we look at it from a different perspective, which I think, again, is your strength, and you're helping me to do that. How can we learn from that mistake, learn from that failure, also embracing each other's feedback, which is kind of what we're doing today, giving that feedback to one another, embrace that, do not take it as a criticism, also communicate it so it's not in a critical way, but embracing that feedback, because
which is a whole different episode.
Yeah, but that was part of that, that was part of that chapter, like embracing that feedback. But essentially we are a startup of two.
Yeah.
So I that's how, for me, I wanted to apply that. And
I think it's interesting how I think this book is so great with this topic, because there's any number of, there's probably 50 different specific things we could have takeaways about, and then hearing you, what stuck out to you, and then hearing what stuck out to me opens my eyes a little bit about you.
Well, do you when you read the book, did that jump out at you, or just curious?
It did not.
No,
and not the parallel.
Okay.
So if we kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about what our perception of what the book could do for you, and then vice versa for me, I think the third part of the book is definitely stuck out to me as, as I look at you and how strong you are, and how ambitious you are, and how hard you work. The take action piece is not really part of the book, is not something that you struggle with, right? You're always you're always thinking, and you're always looking for opportunity. And I think the discipline of the will, like that whole third section.
Yeah.
And this is partly, like you just mentioned, like our perceptions are different because of we grew up in totally different worlds, right? And you had situations occur that were completely out of your control, that rocked your world from a young age, that I didn't have to deal with. So I'll never know what that's like. But I think that if you were to read the book and kind of really put it to heart around the will, the fact that no one can take your will away from you, right? No one has that power unless you give them to it, unless you give that power to them.
You're right. And
so I do see where, and this is partly kind of that fundamental difference between men and women, I compartmentalize a lot better than you do, or not, maybe better is not the right word, I just do it more often. So
it comes naturally to you.
Yeah, so like if an event happens today, I don't see it as connected to something else that happened a week ago, or a week ago, or a month ago, or a year ago. I tend not to.
Right.
Whereas I think you sometimes it can kind of pile on.
Oh yeah, I'm always connecting the dots.
Right. and I get sometimes it's good for me to hear that, because sometimes those dots are connected, but a lot of times they're not. But if you let those dots get connected and it becomes like this piling on type of impact, it can negatively impact you. And I've seen that.
Yeah, I can overanalyze for sure. Really trying to understand, the domino effect of certain things, where there's a lot of wasted time, and going through that process. Like, it really can be pointless.
Yeah, so that was one that I really, that was the biggest one, I think, because if you get overwhelmed because of a like you said, a domino effect or a piling on, it can really impact how each of us moves forward or gets through something. I love, the very beginning of the book, it talks about Marcus Aurelius, and the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Instead of looking at an obstacle, whatever it is.
Yeah.
as just, here we go again. It's another, see, this always happens. You know, this is my life. I'm never gonna blah blah blah.
Yeah,
Whatever
that
happens.
sounds like Eeyore.
Well, I mean, that's kind of there you go, Eeyore.
Lost my tail.
Yeah, but I think it's really important to be objective and look at it and think through these stories. And that's what I love about the book. You hear these stories of people that have overcome, you know, not comparing apples to apples, just, wow, if they did it and here's how they did it, how can I do that?
Right.
You know, for whatever it is. What about you? Hit me.
For you.
Yep.
Okay. So I think it was the Seize the Offensive, and you know, kind of, I don't remember the exact story, but you know, they're talking about a battle and how they constantly were going, or their approach was the same over and over and over again. And if you've already recognized that, hey, I'm not going to win this battle, or I'm not going to get around my enemy, or whoever, you know,
Like watch the flank. I think it was.
yeah,
I was talking about that.
taking the same approach every single time, I need to be creative with my thinking. How else can we come around and be creative with that?
You might
I
yell at
think
me
that
about that sometimes.
it's a frustration.
Yeah.
Because you're incredibly bright, you're very smart, but I do think sometimes when it comes to thinking outside of the box, okay, because I think you always tell me, like, oh, I always think in squares, like I always think in straight lines.
I do great with
And
90-degree angles.
yeah, but life isn't that way.
I know.
It's messy, and I think there are times where, you know, we had situations where maybe it called for you to take a creative approach or hit the pause button and start thinking of some fresh new ideas, or, you know, whatever.
I struggle with that.
And you
I do.
struggle with that, and it is a frustration for me, because, you know, what is happening in between that time where action is not being taken. You know,
What opportunities are lost?
what
Yeah.
opportunities.
That does
You can't
frustrate
get
you. I
time
know
back.
it does, yeah.
Yeah, you can't get time back. Time is a precious thing. I think that it's more of, for me, we are very different. I'm a very act now person. Time is of the essence. And, you know, you can't, if you know that something's not working, don't repeat it. You know, it's just, that's again a waste of your time.
I think so. If I analyze myself there, and I wonder if anyone listening, if you guys are the same way as I am, where I've heard all these stories as well about the value of routine and how that can help ease your mind and free up those creative juices or that creative space in your head. So like they always talk about like Steve Jobs, how he wore the same outfit pretty much every day, and his philosophy was like, well, if that's one less thing I have to worry about.
Yeah, but if we talk about Steve Jobs in this book, it also talks about
How he pushed the agenda.
He pushed it constantly.
So
when
right.
people told him, no, there's no way to go about creating this particular mouse and make it do A, B, and C, he
Right,
said,
he
there's a way
pushed
and I'll
through.
find that way. That's where
Or he put it on his team to do it. Yeah.
yeah, but he knew that there was a way to make it happen.
He did.
And so I think that my frustration is sometimes I feel like maybe throw your hands up a little bit
Or
out of frustration, or I don't know.
fear.
Fear? Okay.
Yeah, because what I've noticed is back to the Steve Jobs kind of story, right? Is I have made excuses in my head that, well, if I follow this routine, it will get me to that point where I'll be able to, be creative or do whatever that extra step is.
Yeah.
And the reality is I'm couching fear inside of this idea about routine. And routines are good and healthy. And there are many times where when I'm in a better routine, I am more productive in whatever we're doing. But I also can couch fear inside of that and mask that fear
Yeah.
of the unknown, or I don't know how to do it, so I'm just going to ignore it. That's just it's definitely a flaw, and I see it. Well, I hear it when you're frustrated. And you just flat out tell me.
Well, because I feel like it's something that I know that you can fix. I know that, I understand the fear of the unknown. I think it would be foolish for anyone at any point in time to say, oh, I've never been fearful of something that I didn't know, as far as what was going to happen next when you go into anything new. But when this has happened, a lot of times it's been in situations where, maybe it's a big decision or something happens that we do need to act. And so it gives me peace of mind. There's something about, creating options, talking around the process, talking it through, that just makes me feel like we're doing something. And
Sure.
you tend to get really quiet sometimes.
I'll get quiet, and
Yeah.
and honestly, I know I do it. like I'll get busy doing something else that ends up having ultimately
As a distraction,
as
yeah.
a distraction, and it makes me feel like I'm being productive when in reality is it's not taking on the challenge head on.
Right.
So I recognize that. Thank you for bringing that up again and again and again. And like, but kind of back to the other side is, admittedly, I also understand my takeaway for you. That's I think that's harder than for me. Like what you're asking about me to change or recognize is probably an easier change. But you've got, our lives shape who we are. So it's harder to recognize and change something that's that significant of like a lifetime of things happening a certain way and changing your entire philosophy and how you react. But I love the idea that we can control how we react to a situation.
Yeah, I need to get better about
Right?
that.
Like
And I think it's
everybody does, but I know I do too. And yeah, I think that's something that, we do have that control over it.
Yeah, like there's actually in that chapter about perspective is, they actually have a few questions in there to ask yourself, to take that step back. Because I think it's part of it is for myself, because it doesn't come naturally, I need to train my mind, to rethink through that. And then maybe it'll come naturally like it does for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna get the next book, the Marcus Aurelius book. I forget what it's called. He's got it's like treatise or thoughts on whatever.
Oh, that one. Okay,
He's got a famous book that a lot of really famous and important people that have made significant impact have kind of kept in their back pocket, or it's always with them, kind of thing. So I'm definitely that'll be one of my next ones.
Nice.
But
yeah,
for our marriage, just in general, right? So those were individual things. Here's one of the things I took away that I thought was that we can apply better in our marriage. And it's near the end where it says amor fati. That's the quote, but it's love everything that happens. It's hard to do, but here's a quote that I instead of trying to explain it, I'll just quote Ryan Holiday from the book. He says, it's a little unnatural, I know, to feel gratitude for things we never wanted to happen in the first place. But we know at this point the opportunities and benefits that lie within adversities. We know that in overcoming them, we emerge stronger, sharper, empowered. There is little reason to delay these feelings, to begrudgingly acknowledge later that it was for the best when we could have felt that in advance because it was inevitable. You love it because it's all fuel, and you don't just want fuel, you need it. You can't go anywhere without it. No one or nothing can. No thing can. So you're grateful for it. And I think for our marriage, we could do a little better job of that, right? Is where is the opportunity within whatever's happening, good or bad?
Yeah.
And how can we get better from it? How can we learn from it? How can we teach our boys through this? And then how can we apply it to our marriage? How can we get stronger or become closer while there's some sort of adversity or an obstacle? How can we be creative together to overcome it?
Yeah.
And look at everything as an opportunity and not the sky is falling, because it's much easier to do the sky is falling thing and get upset and then fight about it and then, whatever happens, all the negative consequences of that. So I love that quote, just, love everything that happens to you. Either learn from it
Gosh, that's
or
tough.
not. It is, right? And that's why I said it's a little unnatural. I know. That's how he starts that quote.
Yeah, that is,
What do you think?
love everything.
If you're imagine if we could have a philosophy of everything that happened. Yeah, of course there's going to be emotions of anger or outrage, or if it's some sort of injustice. But if we took the approach and we're able to really say, okay, take a step back, be as objective as we can, look for an opportunity to improve, strengthen, bring our closeness, a closeness between us. I just think that could be wonderful for us.
No, I think that's really great. And I think that, having that view, that mindset, again, would on my behalf, it would take me time, to get to that point where I'm able to do that naturally. I really would have to be intentional about it.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's going to come really naturally to me. But I do think that, with that being said, a lot of, I read something the other day, right now with everything that's going on, there are people that are going to create things right now in the midst of this coronavirus. Businesses are going to come out of this at the same time, while people are going through a hard time with maybe job losses or companies are going under, restaurants are shutting down, there's also going to be the birth of a lot of other new innovative products, solutions, businesses, all kinds of things.
It talks about that in the book specifically,
Yeah.
how like most of the Fortune 500 companies were,
Before, this
Yeah.
is before Corona, and it
This
said
is
that in
long
the
before.
book, and it's
like how they were
today.
formed during a recession or
Right.
during some sort of natural disaster, or
Yeah.
they listed a whole handful of them. So I think for us, like, how do we do that? That's
Right.
the hard part, is like,
So you want to be on that side of the coin.
yeah, right. Whether not necessarily starting a Fortune 500 company, but if it's
why
an
not?
investment, or well, I mean, you know what I mean, or if
Yeah.
it's a business, or if it's some, for us, like, is this a time to kind of look at what other avenues for business or income, or anything?
Yeah,
Job,
where should we be placing our efforts?
Yeah.
Sitting around and waiting for this to pass
watching Netflix
would be fool. Yeah, I mean, of course there's going to be days like that, but that would be foolish. It would.
Right.
It's going to be a select few that are able to, use this time and use it wisely.
Why
the other
not
thing
us?
that, yeah, I mean,
And
why
why
not
not
us?
you
Why not
guys
you
that are
guys?
listening,
Yeah.
right?
The other thing I had just, jotted down as far as for us is not recognizing your failure or your misstep is self-absorbed. And I think that there's no room for that in marriage. And I'm not saying that we're doing that right now, but I think we need to be mindful of that, is when we make a mistake, whether you make a mistake or I make a mistake, going immediately to play the blame game on the other person when failure happens, okay, isn't going to serve either one of us. You know?
There's like the
And
blame
so-
game, and then there's being defensive
that?
about it instead of recognizing.
Or that, yeah.
Right.
or going on the defense.
Yeah.
But I think if you're going on the defense, maybe the other person's already trying to like point a finger,
Could be,
and
yeah.
maybe they're not. But I'm saying typically if you're on the defense, is because you're feeling like the other person is attacking. Before, I think taking a step back and looking at whatever the failure is, what's your hand in it, where did you go wrong, instead of immediately thinking that you are the person that's, squeaky clean, without fault in any form or fashion. I thought, and obviously, again, this is not, I'm applying it to marriage.
Right.
He's talking about it in a different setting, but you can apply it, to your marriage as well, and to your relationships, and whether it's at home or in business. So that to me really stood out, and I thought, that's something I probably need to also work on. Take that step back.
Good deal. Well, this is
You
fun.
like that one, right?
I like anything and everything about you. No, I mean, we've really spent a lot of time over the last 2 years, really, I think, evolving as a couple, and really spending more time on our intimacy and our communication and better understanding each other's perspective, and we're quicker to apologize to each other because of that. I think,
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, like just the other day we got into a little tiff. I went outside, did some, I don't remember what I was doing, and I was like, just started immediately thinking about, wow, like, even if my end goal was the same, and we end up saying that to each other. And once I came in and I apologized for my approach and what I had said, not that what I was saying was wrong, it was just that I approached it in a way that made you, be defensive, and you were right to be defensive. So, but you even said it. You said, I know for that particular situation, our end game or our big picture was the same. We
were just communicating it differently.
Yeah. And so that's a big step for us. How many of you guys get into these arguments, and then at the end of it, you're like, what were we even arguing about? Like, we agree, we're on the same page. We were just fighting over how we were fighting. Mm-hmm. So recognizing that quickly and changing course is definitely something we've gotten better at. So hopefully we can
It
continue.
saves you a lot of time, a lot of heartache, and it's just, you're on the same team. So, but yeah, communicating, especially because, like I mentioned earlier, what school of adversity you come from is different than the school that I came from.
Yeah.
That's also going to affect our communication. But this is a fantastic book. We really encourage anybody that,
If you haven't,
if you haven't read it, pick it up. If you've already read it, I would say read it again.
Reading it right now is, just because it's so applicable with the world we're all living in right now.
Yeah. And again, it's The Obstacle's the Way, The Timeless Art of Turning Trials into Triumph by Ryan Holiday. It's a fantastic read. Also, we are working on our next series, and we're going to continue again with the growth series, but we do have another series we're really excited about. It's in the works. It's called Sexpectations, where we're going to discuss everything around sex within the marriage. And obviously it's really fun. That's really going to be a fun topic to talk about. Obviously we're going to cover a lot of different things. I know we're probably going to put some polls out there to try to get some feedback, some other ideas around sexpectations, because that may look different for everyone. We know it does, but we want to talk about that, and we're excited. But that'll be our next series, and we are working on choosing our next book that we're going to read, and also continue with the growth series.
So if you have any ideas,
any recommendations,
please hit us up on Instagram, or send us an email to feedback@destinationmarriagepodcast.com. If we see some trends, or there's some books that maybe we've never heard of, we look them up. We're more than willing to do that, and that may be a lot of fun too. Just read a book kind of blindly, and then discuss amongst ourselves of how it applies. So
I like it.
Yeah. Well, thanks guys for tuning in.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
And we will talk to you guys soon with our next episode.
Sounds great. Bye, guys.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if so, please continue to listen on Podbean, iTunes, or Spotify, and hit subscribe. Also, visit us at destinationmarriagepodcast.com. Follow us on Instagram at destination_marriage, and be sure to tune in to our next episode.